I was never supposed to be at that wedding. Not really. Sure, my name was on the invite, printed in gold like they were doing me a favor. But they sat me so far in the back, I might as well have been the janitor. No speech, no father-daughter dance, not even a moment of eye contact from the girl I raised. Just a table number by the bathrooms and a silent message. Stay quiet, stay forgotten. But when the priest asked if anyone objected, I stood up, slow, calm, steady, and played the voicemail she left me at 2:14 in the morning. Her words, slurred and raw, filled the church like a confession. By the time it ended, half the room had walked out, and my daughter was in tears, begging me not to leave. What happened next was rather unexpected. I will tell you everything. First, let me thank you for your continuous support. If you love stories like this one, support us by subscribing to this channel and comment where you are watching us from. It will be great to hear from you. Now let's jump into the details of what happened. I used to think the worst pain a man could feel was the kind that comes from losing something. But that's not quite right. Losing is sharp and sudden. It stabs, but it passes. No, the worst pain is being forgotten while still alive. Being slowly erased from someone's world until even your outline disappears. That's the kind of pain that lingers in your bones, settles in your chest, and eats at you with a quiet, merciless hunger. My name's Daniel, and I drive for a courier service now. Nothing fancy, just packages, documents, the occasional last-minute birthday gift someone forgot to mail. It's not what I thought I'd be doing at 56, but it keeps the lights on. Some days it's enough. Others, well, I've got a lot of silence in my truck, and silence has a funny way of dragging out memories you'd rather bury. My daughter, Emily, was once the light of my life. She had this gap in her teeth when she was 6, right in the front, and when she smiled, it was like looking straight into the sun. We used to have these pancake mornings on Saturdays, just her and me, trying to flip them high like on TV, making a mess of the kitchen while her mother yelled from the other room about getting syrup in her hair. Emily always said I made the best pancakes. Even after the divorce, even when I moved out and everything got split down the middle like furniture in a courtroom, she still said that. But over the years, things shifted. Subtle at first. She stopped calling as often. Birthdays became text messages. Our pancake Saturdays faded into polite dinners every few months where she mostly talked about school and her mother's new husband, Rick. The man with the good job, the big house, the steady hands. The man who had, conveniently, never missed a school recital or a father-daughter dance. Unlike me. I tried, God knows I tried. But you can't compete with someone who plays house while you're the one scraping together child support and showing up on alternate weekends with a forced smile. Rick was always there, with his pressed shirts and his gold watch and the way he called her kiddo like it belonged to him. Slowly, Emily started referring to him as her dad in public. I was Daniel, then just my mom's ex. Eventually, just a footnote. And then came the wedding invitation. It arrived in a cream-colored envelope with gold lettering, like it was trying too hard to be elegant. No phone call, no heads up, just an invite, like I was some distant relative who might or might not attend. I remember standing at my kitchen counter, staring at that thing like it had personally slapped me. I turned it over, looking for some mistake. Maybe it had gone to the wrong Daniel. But no, there was my name, printed in that same careful script. Mr. Daniel Foster. You are cordially invited. There was no +1. That part didn't surprise me. I hadn't dated seriously in years, and Emily never asked about my love life. But what did surprise me? What hit me in the gut was the seating chart. Folded neatly inside, like an afterthought, was a little map of the venue. Her mom and Rick were right up front, naturally. Table 1. I wasn't even in the same zip code. I was near the back. Table 19. Past the bar, near the bathrooms. Closer to the kitchen than the aisle. I would have had a better view watching the livestream on my phone. At first, I told myself it didn't matter. At least she invited you. I muttered, over and over, like a prayer to keep from feeling too much. But it did matter. Of course it did. That's your kid. That's supposed to be your moment too. Even if the years weren't kind, even if the past is messy. A man doesn't raise a daughter just to be parked next to the restroom while another man walks her down the aisle. I didn't RSVP right away. I let the invite sit on my fridge, held up by a faded magnet from a pizza place that went out of business 3 years ago. I'd pass it every day, trying to decide whether I could stomach it. Whether I could sit there and smile while watching Rick take my place in every photograph, every speech, every sentimental song. I didn't have an answer. Then, 3 days before the wedding, I got the voicemail. It was 2:14 a.m. I remember the time because it lit up on my phone in the darkness of my apartment, waking me from a dead sleep. I didn't recognize the number at first. For a moment, I thought maybe it was work. Some urgent delivery, maybe a mistake with the overnight schedule. But when I listened to the message, I sat upright in bed, my heart thudding. Dad. Her voice was cracked, raw, like she'd been crying. I don't even know if you'll listen to this. I shouldn't be calling, but I had a few drinks and I miss you. There was a pause. A long one. I heard her sniffling. I don't know what happened, really. I mean, I do. You and Mom. Everything just got so complicated. And Rick's always been there, and it was easier, I guess, to just go along with it. But I shouldn't have. Not like this. Another pause. You're my dad. And I know I've been distant. And I hate myself for that. I wish things were different. I wish you were part of this. Really part of it. Not shoved in the back like you don't matter. Her voice broke again. Anyway, I don't know why I'm saying this now. You probably hate me. But I love you. I do. I just don't know how to fix it. Then a beep. Message over. I sat there in the dark for a long time. Phone still clutched in my hand, staring at nothing. It felt like the past 15 years had come crashing down in that 1 minute and 48 seconds. Every missed birthday, every silent Christmas, every awkward half-hug at the door, they all bled into that voicemail. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel angry. I just felt tired. The next morning, I didn't call her back. I didn't even text. I just saved the voicemail, made sure it was backed up to my laptop, and then I got in my truck and drove. No destination, just miles and music and my own thoughts echoing off the dashboard. I thought about the wedding. About how she was probably going to wake up hungover, embarrassed, pretending it never happened. I thought about how Rick would be the one helping her fix her veil, the one giving the father of the bride speech. I thought about how the rest of the world would see him as the hero. And me? I'd be the ghost at table 19. But something had shifted in me. I wasn't going to make a scene. I wasn't going to show up with anger or vengeance. But I also wasn't going to stay silent anymore. Not after that message. Not after being treated like I was a footnote in my own daughter's life. I picked up the invitation off my fridge and stared at it for a long time. Then, slowly, I filled out the RSVP. Yes, I'll attend. And I'll be ready. I didn't tell anyone I was going. Not my sister, not my coworkers, not even my neighbor, Carol, who always seemed to know everyone's business in the building. I didn't want opinions or sympathy. I didn't need someone to pat my shoulder and tell me to be the bigger person. I'd been the bigger person for years, swallowing every slight, every distance Emily put between us, every time she called Rick Dad like it was natural. I wasn't going to do that anymore. I kept listening to the voicemail. Every night leading up to the wedding, I'd replay it while sitting at the kitchen table, phone cradled in my palm like it was something sacred. Not because I needed to memorize it. I already had. I could hear her words even when it wasn't playing. But because part of me didn't believe she'd actually said it. Part of me needed proof. That even just once, my daughter remembered me. Needed me. The message was raw, unfiltered. It wasn't the curated politeness I was used to from her. It was a moment of truth, one she probably never meant for me to hold on to. And yet, here I was, clutching it like it was a lifeline. Her voice, shaky and soft, pierced through years of silence like it was yesterday we were sitting in that messy kitchen flipping pancakes. But I didn't know what to do with it. Should I confront her with it? Let it be a private moment, a buried confession? Or worse, say something and have her deny it? Brush it off like a drunken mistake? I couldn't risk that. Not yet. Not when it felt like the only real thing between us in years. I didn't sleep much that week. I'd lie in bed, staring at the ceiling fan slicing through the air, thinking about everything I should have said to her over the years and everything she never said back. I kept wondering if I should have fought harder for custody, if I should have shown up at her school uninvited, if I should have made more noise instead of fading into the background the way the courts and her mother had quietly demanded. I remember one night in particular, 2 nights before the wedding, when I pulled out an old photo album from the hall closet. It had been gathering dust, wedged between a box of expired batteries and a forgotten set of winter boots. The leather cover had started to crack, and the pages inside smelled faintly of mold and time. But when I opened it, there she was, Emily, in all her toothy, gap-grinned glory. Birthday parties, beach trips, her first bike ride. I even found a picture of the two of us camping, sitting by a fire roasting marshmallows, her arms wrapped around my neck. I looked so much younger then, so sure of myself. I hadn't realized how much of that man I'd lost until I saw his face again. Looking at those photos, I didn't just feel sad. I felt something deeper, a kind of righteous anger, the kind that simmers in your chest like a low flame. I had been there. I was there. Maybe not in every moment. Maybe not in the way Rick was, with his picture-perfect stability and effortless timing. But I had given what I had. I'd fought through weekends, made up for missed birthdays, saved drawings she probably forgot she ever gave me. I didn't deserve to be forgotten. And I sure as hell didn't deserve to be buried at the back of her wedding like a family embarrassment. The morning before the wedding, I woke up early. Too early. I made coffee, but it tasted like nothing. I poured half of it down the sink and stared at myself in the mirror for a while. My beard had more gray in it than I remembered. The bags under my eyes were permanent now, like tattoos of tiredness. But my gaze, it was clear. Steady. I listened to the voicemail again. I just don't know how to fix it. That line cut deepest, not because she was lost, but because it was the first time she admitted it. Emily, my daughter, who had spent years acting like nothing was wrong, had finally cracked. She knew. She knew. And now that I had that sliver of truth, I wasn't letting it go. I tucked my phone into the inside pocket of my jacket, double-checked that the audio file was backed up to my email, a USB drive, and even uploaded to the cloud just in case. Petty? Maybe. But I wasn't going to let her pretend I didn't matter anymore. Not this time. That afternoon, I stopped by the church just to get a feel for the place. I hadn't been in a church in a long time, maybe since my mother's funeral. It was a modest building, white steeple, red doors, one of those places that probably did more baby showers than baptisms. I walked the perimeter, pretending to be curious about the architecture while really just checking where everything would happen. And then, purely by accident, I ran into Rick. He was walking out of the side door, talking on his phone. He almost didn't notice me until we were nearly face to face. His expression dropped, just for a second, before he slapped on that familiar politician's smile. Well, look who decided to show up, he said, tucking his phone into his blazer. I didn't answer right away. I just nodded, my jaw tight. You got the invitation, I see, he added, hands in his pockets, posture relaxed like he owned the place. I did, I said flatly. You know, Emily was worried you wouldn't come. She didn't want you to feel out of place. I raised an eyebrow. Is that why I'm sitting next to the mop closet? He chuckled. Come on, don't be like that. It's a big guest list. We had to make room. I stared at him hard. You really think I'm just here for a seat? He tilted his head, trying to play innocent. You tell me. There was a moment of silence between us. Not awkward, just heavy. Rick had always been good at these little verbal dances, these subtle jabs wrapped in sugar. But not today. You might have replaced me in photos, I said, but not in blood. And with that, I turned and walked away. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. His silence behind me said everything. That night, as I lay in bed for the last time before the ceremony, I felt something I hadn't felt in years, calm. Not peace, exactly, but a quiet certainty. I didn't know how the day would unfold. I didn't know what would happen when I stood up, phone in hand. But I did know this. I had every right to be there. I had every right to speak. And this time, they were going to hear me, whether they liked it or not. Weddings are strange things. They're supposed to be joyful, hopeful, filled with fresh beginnings. But that morning, all I felt was the end of something. Not just the end of my daughter's single life. No, something deeper. The end of whatever faint thread had been left between us. The kind of thread that stretches across years of silence, unanswered messages, and brief, polite visits. The kind of thread that holds a father's heart together with just enough tension to still believe, still hope. but I felt it loosening with every breath I took as I pulled into the church parking lot. It was a warm afternoon, sunny, too cheerful for the kind of storm sitting inside me. The lot was already half full when I got there. Rows of polished cars, floral arrangements being rushed in by young guys in black polos, and a few early guests chatting in clusters outside the main entrance. I parked near the back, alone, deliberately. My car didn't belong among the Mercedes and Lexuses lined up front. And truth be told, I didn't want to run into anyone just yet. I sat in the car a few minutes before heading in, just breathing, just listening to nothing. I hadn't played the voicemail again. Not today. I didn't need to. Her words were embedded now, like grooves in my bones. You're my dad. Funny how 5 syllables can rip a man wide open. I straightened my tie, a cheap navy one I bought from Kohl's the day before, and checked my jacket pocket one last time. Phone secure. Battery full. File backed up. I hadn't felt this prepared for anything in years. Not since court. Not since the custody battles where I learned how quickly a man's reputation could be rewritten with a few carefully chosen words. I walked into the church and was greeted by a girl in her early 20s holding a clipboard. Hi there. Name, please. Daniel Foster. She smiled and flipped through her list. Her brow furrowed for a moment before it lit up again. Oh yes. Table 19. You're, down the left aisle, near the refreshment table. Of course I was. Thanks, I said quietly. The ceremony space was beautiful. Vaulted ceilings, candles and tall glass columns, rose petals lining the aisle in soft pinks and creams. Guests were milling about, finding their seats, snapping photos. The kind of event that looked like it cost more than my last car. I kept my eyes down as I walked. I didn't want to see them, not yet. Not her mother. Not Rick. Not Emily. Table 19 was exactly what I expected. Far left, behind a column, with a lovely view of the emergency exit. I sat alone for a few minutes before a few distant relatives trickled in. Cousins I hadn't seen in years. An aunt who gave me a strange smile. Small talk followed, half-hearted questions about my work, weather comments, awkward glances. They didn't ask about Emily. They didn't ask how I was feeling. And honestly, I was grateful. I watched guests hug and laugh and pose for pictures while I sat in the shadows. Like a stranger. Like a ghost. Then I saw her. Emily entered the room from a side door, her veil tucked back, hair in an elegant twist. She was beautiful, radiant. The kind of bride you see in wedding catalogs, smiling, graceful, polished. But all I could think about was how that smile wasn't for me. It hadn't been for years. She laughed at something the wedding planner said, then turned to Rick, who stood beside her in a crisp charcoal suit, beaming like he'd just been crowned king. He leaned down and whispered something in her ear, and she nodded. He touched her cheek, and I watched my daughter thank another man for walking her down the aisle. No one looked at me. No one acknowledged me. I could have walked out right then, and no one would have noticed. But I didn't. Because I wasn't there to be seen. I was there to be heard. When the music started and everyone stood, I stayed seated for a second longer than the rest, my knees stiff, my heart heavier than it had ever been. Emily walked slowly down the aisle, arm in arm with Rick, while her mother dabbed at the corner of her eyes like she hadn't spent the last decade pushing me out of the picture. The ceremony began. The priest was warm, engaging, cracked a few light jokes that earned scattered laughter. It was all picture perfect. The kind of event they'd remember fondly for years. Until it wasn't. I sat in silence through the vows, through the exchange of rings. I didn't move, didn't shift. I just watched. I watched the man who replaced me beam with pride. I watched my daughter promise herself to another man while barely remembering the first man who ever carried her through a thunderstorm at age 5, whispering, "I've got you," over and over until she fell asleep on my shoulder. Then the priest said it. If there is anyone here who objects to this union, speak now or forever hold your peace. The room held its breath. It was one of those old traditions no one expected anyone to take seriously. Just a formality, a final beat before applause. But I stood, not angrily, not dramatically, just calmly. My chair scraped softly against the floor. Heads turned. Whispers began. I could see her eyes widen, confusion first, then something deeper. Fear? Shame? I don't know. I reached into my pocket, pulled out my phone, and pressed play. The room went silent as her voice filled the space, shaky and soft, echoing off the church walls. Dad, I miss you. I didn't say a word. I just held the phone steady. I wish things were different. I wish you were part of this. Really part of it. Murmurs began. Guests shifted. The groom glanced at Emily. Her mother turned pale. Rick stared at me like I'd just set the place on fire. When the message ended, I put the phone away and looked directly at Emily. That's all, I said. Then I sat down. Silence. Long, thick silence. And then the whispers grew louder. A few people stood up and left. Some of the groom's family. I saw the photographer lower his camera. I saw the priest glance nervously at the couple. But I didn't look away. Not from her. Not from the daughter who once called me daddy, through tears. Not from the girl I used to carry to bed with graham cracker crumbs on her cheeks. She was crying. Not like the soft, pretty crying of a wedding moment, but a different kind. The kind that came from somewhere deeper. Somewhere real. Rick whispered something in her ear, but she shook her head. The groom looked stunned. The crowd didn't know what to do. Then she stepped forward. Dad, she said, voice shaking. And she walked down the aisle, toward me. I hadn't planned for what came next. In my head, it ended with the voicemail. With me standing, calmly, saying nothing, letting her own words echo in front of God and everyone. I thought that would be the period at the end of the sentence. I didn't imagine a response, didn't expect one. I figured they'd rush to salvage the moment, offer some excuse, wave it all away like a hiccup in the script. But when Emily walked toward me, veil trembling in her hands, mascara trailing like bruises under her eyes, everything around us went quiet again. Not the ceremonial kind of quiet, but the breath-holding kind. The kind where people lean in just slightly, waiting for the next explosion. Dad, she said again, softer this time. I stood up slowly. My knees felt locked, like they were unsure about supporting me through what came next. She stopped a few feet from me. Her voice dropped to a whisper, barely audible even in the hush. Why would you do that? I looked at her, long and hard. Not the bride, not the woman in pearls and lace, but the little girl who used to run down the hallway in mismatched socks. I wanted to say 100 things. I wanted to tell her she left me no choice. I wanted to tell her that seating me in the shadows was one thing, but pretending I didn't matter was another. I wanted to scream. Instead, I said, you meant it. She blinked. What? The message. You meant it. She opened her mouth. Closed it. I saved it, I continued. Because it was the first time in years I heard the truth. There was a beat of silence between us. Then, I was drunk. I know, I said quietly. But you were honest. More guests were starting to murmur now. Her mother had stood up, face red with humiliation, trying to wave the officiant to do something. Rick stood next to her, jaw clenched, looking like he wanted to tackle me, but knew better than to make a scene in a church. Emily shook her head slowly, like she couldn't process what was happening. You humiliated me, she said. No, I said, voice steady. You humiliated me. For years. That did it. From behind her, her mother, my ex, stormed down the aisle in heels too high for her speed. Her lipstick was cracking at the corners, and her voice cut through the church like broken glass. What the hell are you doing, Daniel? You want to ruin your daughter's wedding because of some personal grudge. She stood between us now, facing me, hands on her hips. I didn't flinch. You buried me at the back of this church like I was some distant uncle. I'm her father. You abandoned her, she snapped. I felt the heat rise in my chest. No, you pushed me out. Every holiday, every decision, every time she needed a ride or advice, you already had Rick lined up. He was there, she hissed. You weren't. I wasn't invited, I said. You made sure of that. Rick finally walked down the aisle, stepping between the rows, one hand raised like a peace offering. All right, all right. This isn't the time or the place, he said smoothly. Let's take this outside. I turned to him. You took everything from me and pretended I never existed. And now you want to play mediator. I didn't take anything, he said, almost smug. I just showed up. Maybe if you had. Don't, I said, my voice suddenly loud enough to make a few people jump. Don't you dare lecture me about showing up. You showed up after the divorce. I showed up when she had night terrors at age 7 and needed someone to sleep in the hallway. I showed up when her hamster died and she refused to eat for 2 days. You showed up when the papers were clean and the wounds had already scarred over. Emily was crying now. Not just tears, real sobs. Her shoulders shook, and she sank onto the bench beside me, face in her hands. "Stop it," she said. "Please. Everyone's watching." Rick took a step forward, but I put my hand out. "Let her talk." She looked up at me, eyes raw. I didn't know what else to do. You and Mom hated each other. It was easier not to choose. And then Rick was there, and he was nice and steady, and I thought if I just let things go quiet, everything would be easier. "It was easier for you," I said, voice cracking now. "Not for me." She wiped her face. "You think I don't feel guilty? You think I haven't been carrying this around? Every time I looked at you, I saw how much I disappointed you. It was easier to keep you at a distance than face that." I swallowed hard. "I would have forgiven you," I said, "if you'd just said something. Anything." Then she whispered it. "I'm sorry." And for a second, just 1 second, I saw her again. The girl who used to hug me so tight I thought she'd break my ribs. The one who made me hand-drawn Father's Day cards with stick figures and hearts. Then the groom, silent until now, finally approached. He knelt beside her, gently placing a hand on her back. "Do you want to keep going?" he asked. She looked at him, at me, at the room full of stunned guests. "I don't know," she whispered. "I need a minute." They left through the side door, her dress trailing behind like the moment had physically deflated her. For a while, no one said anything. Then people started standing. Some guests left quietly. Others began whispering. Her mother stormed back to the front, furious. Rick lingered in the aisle, giving me a look I couldn't quite decipher. Part contempt, part uncertainty. And me? I sat down. For once, I didn't feel small. I didn't feel erased. I felt real, like someone they'd have to reckon with. I didn't move for a while. Not when Emily left. Not when the groom followed her. Not even when half the guests began trickling out of the church like they were escaping a sinking ship. I just sat there at table 19, hands resting on my thighs, letting the weight of the moment settle over me like dust. Around me, the room was all murmurs and motion. The officiant whispered with the planner, trying to keep some structure intact. Her mother, now red-faced and pacing, barked into her phone. Probably damage control, probably calling a PR-savvy cousin or the venue manager. Rick had disappeared, and honestly, that alone was a small mercy. I could hear them talking about me. Quietly at first, but then not so quietly. That was her father? Did you hear that message? Was this planned? God, imagine doing that at your own daughter's wedding. People couldn't help themselves. They always need a villain, and I guess I gave them one. Still, no one came up to me directly. Not yet. They just looked, stared, whispered, judged. Except one. Jasmine, Emily's cousin on her mother's side. A bold, mouthy girl I hadn't seen since she was a teenager, now clearly in her late 20s with sharp eyes and a voice that could cut glass. She strode straight up to my table, arms crossed, eyes narrowed. "You really did it, huh?" I looked up. "Did what?" "Blew it all up," she said. No malice, just blunt truth. "Wedding's over. Groom's freaking out. Your daughter's in the dressing room, sobbing like someone died." I stared at her. I didn't plan to ruin it. I just couldn't let it keep going like nothing happened. She pulled out the chair across from me and sat down without asking. Good. That caught me off guard. She leaned forward, elbows on the table. "They made you the ghost. For years. And now everyone has to remember who you are." That's not cruelty. That's balance. I didn't answer right away. Just looked at her and said, quietly, "Do you think she hates me?" She smiled a little, but it wasn't mocking. "No. That's why she's crying. Hate's easy. Guilt? Guilt'll tear you apart." Before I could respond, a woman I didn't recognize approached the table. Older, neatly dressed, one of the groom's relatives probably. She didn't smile. "I just wanted to say," she began, her tone clipped and controlled, "that this was highly inappropriate. Whatever personal issues you had should have been handled privately. You embarrassed your daughter. You embarrassed all of us." Jasmine stood before I could even react. "He is her father," she snapped. "Not the valet. Not the caterer. The father. Maybe if everyone hadn't pretended he was invisible, you wouldn't be standing here clutching your pearls." The woman huffed, turned, and stormed off. Jasmine sat back down like it was nothing. Thanks, I muttered. She shrugged. I hate hypocrisy. Eventually, I stood up and wandered outside. The air hit me like a wave, cooler than inside, quieter. I leaned against the low stone wall near the parking lot, away from the lingering guests and the cloud of whispers they carried. That's when I saw her. Emily. She was standing by herself under the awning of the chapel, dress bunched in her hands, bouquet discarded on the bench beside her. Her hair had come undone in places, and her makeup was smeared. She looked real. Not like the perfect bride on the invitation. Not like the polished woman I'd been watching from a distance for years. She looked like my daughter. She noticed me. We didn't speak at first. Just stood there, the quiet stretching between us, full of things we didn't know how to say. I don't even know if it's still happening, she said finally, eyes on the parking lot. The wedding. I nodded, not trusting my voice yet. I just needed a second to breathe, she added. Everything got loud so fast. I stepped closer. Do you regret the message? She looked at me, eyes wet. No. Do you regret that I played it? Silence. Then, barely above a whisper. No. I just wish you didn't have to. That broke something in me. A small piece I didn't even know I'd been holding on to. I wish that too, I said. We sat down on the bench, side by side. Close, but not touching. She sighed. Rick's furious. He said you made me look weak. I laughed bitterly. That man never understood strength. She turned to me. I don't know what I'm doing, Dad. I thought I had it all figured out. The wedding, the marriage, the clean narrative. And now, you're allowed to not have it figured out, I said. That's how you grow. She bit her lip. You think I ruined everything? I shook my head. No, but I think you finally faced everything. We sat there a while longer. She told me about the groom, Mark, how kind he was, how patient. But also how lately she'd felt like she was living a version of herself that wasn't quite real. How she didn't know if she was ready. How she'd never really faced what she lost when she stopped calling me. I thought keeping things neat would make life easier, she admitted. But all it did was make me feel hollow. I nodded slowly. Truth has a way of making a mess before it makes peace. A few minutes later, she stood. I need to talk to Mark, she said. I stood too. Whatever happens, I'm here. I've always been here. She didn't say anything, just looked at me for a long moment. Then she stepped forward, hugged me, tight, like she hadn't since she was a teenager. Thank you, she whispered, for not letting me forget. A week passed before I heard from Emily again. I didn't expect her to call. After everything that went down, I figured she'd go dark for a while, sort through the wreckage, talk to whoever she needed to talk to, and decide what story she wanted to tell the world. She'd have 1,000 voices in her ear. Friends, her mother, Rick, the groom, if they were still speaking. And somewhere at the bottom of that pile, maybe mine. But she called. I was eating takeout on the couch, some lukewarm lo mein from a styrofoam box, reruns humming in the background, when the phone lit up with her name. Emily. I stared at the screen for a full 10 seconds before answering. Hi, I said. She took a breath. Hi. It wasn't awkward. Not exactly. But it was careful. Like we were walking across a frozen lake, both of us trying not to crack the surface. I've been thinking, she said. A lot. I didn't interrupt. I needed that message, she continued. I didn't know how much I needed to hear myself say it out loud. Until you made everyone hear it too. I leaned back into the couch. It wasn't revenge, you know. I know, she said quickly. It felt like it in the moment, but I get it now. You weren't trying to hurt me. You were trying to stop the lie. That sentence sat heavy between us. She went on. I didn't marry him. I closed my eyes. I'm not saying it was because of what happened, she added, but it opened something I'd been avoiding. I didn't even realize how much of my life had become about performance. Keeping everyone happy. Living clean. But I couldn't promise forever to someone else when I hadn't even made peace with myself. There was a quiet sort of pride in her voice. Hesitant, but honest. I'm sorry, she said again. Not just for the wedding. For the last 10 years. I pushed you away and let other people rewrite who you were to me. I let the silence stretch for a second before I responded. I spent a long time trying to figure out what I did wrong, I said. Trying to be less angry. More forgiving. And then, eventually, just invisible. She sniffed. You weren't invisible. You made me feel that way, I said gently. And I let you. Another pause. I don't know what this means for us, she said. But I don't want to pretend anymore. If we're going to build something real, it has to start from a place of truth. Even if it's messy, even if we have to undo a lot. That's all I ever wanted. We didn't say I love you. Not yet. Maybe not for a while. But it didn't matter. Because love, when it's been through that kind of storm, isn't always loud. Sometimes it's just showing up, calling back, starting again. That night, I sat on my balcony with a cup of coffee and watched the lights flicker in the apartment across the way. I thought about the version of myself that had been sitting in the back row at that wedding. The man who thought he'd reached the final chapter in a story he didn't get to finish. And I realized something. Closure doesn't always look like reconciliation. Sometimes it's just truth, spoken out loud. Sometimes it's someone calling you by your name again. And sometimes, if you're lucky, it's your daughter remembering who you are and finally choosing to see you again. If you've ever been pushed aside by your own family, forgotten, rewritten, made to feel like you don't matter, then this story was for you. Some truths are messy, but staying silent can cost more than speaking out ever will. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Was the father right to do what he did? Or should he have stayed silent? Let's talk about boundaries, loyalty, and how far is too far when it comes to reclaiming your voice.